My name is Louis Santos, and I am a solutions engineer at Auth0. I guess show of hands, and I'm always kind of scared to ask this question. How many people have heard of Auth0? Oh, all right. We're amongst friends. Maybe a harder question. How many people have heard of Okta? About the same? Cool. It's always a pleasure of mine to come out and talk to people, to customers, developers, et cetera. And I ask the question often, and what I found is that a lot more people seem to know of Auth0 versus Okta. And I think that depends on where you are in the tech space. I think if you're building, then you're very familiar with Auth0. If you're interacting and using applications, you may see Okta on a daily basis. But Okta does own Auth0, and essentially what we've done is we have these different platforms for identity. And depending on what you're trying to do, we typically recommend one, the other, or sometimes both of them together. So my job as a solutions engineer is to kind of figure out what someone wants to do and how our technology can help. Amanda, I was going to do this whole MCP inspector thing, and it was it was exactly like yours. So we're going to kind of go a cappella a bit.
Do you know why mine failed?
It couldn't contact the server?
No, my token was stale. It was holding on to it. The MCP inspector doesn't refresh really easily. You have to manually clear your tokens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
There you go. So,
And we'll talk about tokens today and why they're important.
all right. Yeah, you talk about tokens too. Tokens are so important, we get them twice.
Yeah, all right. If I say access token, ID token, refresh token, does everyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah? Just a level set. So typically with OAuth, when you log in, depending how you set it up, usually, you get up to 3 tokens, right? There's an ID token that represents that you've logged in, who you are, information about you. There's an access token that is typically for something specific, right? So it's like a key to open a very specific door. And then you have a refresh token. Refresh tokens are really cool. Think about your cell phone today, your mobile phone, or mobile phone. We're joking at work, how to pronounce it, is it mobile or mobile? Also try to guess where I'm from. So you have Amazon or Uber and you're logged in, you're always logged in. Is it because they simply don't care about security? There's a lot happening in the background, and so if we were to simplify this, is if you're using OAuth to log in, you have this access token and refresh token. The refresh token is continuously used to get a new access token and a new refresh token. And while that's happening, you can do a lot of cool things from a security perspective to see, is this who we think it is? Is the user now showing up in Australia when they were in New York 5 minutes ago? So that's essentially kind of what's happening on your phone. And if you're ever building an app and you want to kind of maintain the user to be logged in, you can implement this. And we're going to apply this today to MCP and building agents, right? And thinking about tokens and how do we manage these tokens? And then when you start to scale that, how do you manage that? And then we're going to kind of flip the script a bit, because I think a lot of the use cases today are building agents or bots that people are going to go to a website to interact with. So essentially anyone, right? We typically see that as a SIAM or a B2C use case, a business consumer customer type use case. Then we'll talk about the enterprise world and how does that work there? Because if you think about the enterprise world, today in terms of what browser you use, whether you're going to interact with a brand or a website on your phone, your tablet, your desktop, your PS5, that's up to you. When you go into an enterprise type company, right, or you're working somewhere, they now tend to control how you use their tools, right? Because they have to protect their IP, they have to protect their technology, et cetera. So you may be restricted to use a specific laptop, you have to use VPN, you have to use MFA, et cetera. So how do you build agents for that? And we'll talk a bit about that today also. And I tend to ramble on, so if you give me a 5-minute or 2-minute warning? Yeah, cool. So I was at the airport and I typed in MCP because I was like, we're going to talk about what is MCP, and of course everyone knows. AI did okay here, right? It said, was it commonly referring to the Newfoundland and Labrador Medical Care Plan? Before I came here, it then updated it, or I guess depending on the location I'm in, it then said that MCP is a model context protocol. So AI or LLMs are fun in that way, in that you don't always get the response you're looking for. So when it comes to MCP, and I'll jump out of here, you're going to use what you want to use, like fast MCP, it can be the Apollo tools. The idea is, we're going to meet you where you are. So when you're looking for something like an authorization server, there is a work OS, and there's a bunch of other companies out there. That's actually a very good thing, right? It's an open standard. I think the MCP spec specified OAuth 2.1, right, is in terms of what they're going to use. And OAuth 2.1 is actually just taking all the good parts from OAuth 2.0 and saying these are the best practices. So that's a good thing. And so Auth0, Okta, work OS, and a bunch of other companies out there, we built platforms that adhere to the spec. So very quickly, if you wanted an authorization server, this is the Auth0 dashboard. One thing that's part of the spec is you need OAuth, so that's already there. You need DCR, right, dynamic client registration. And that might change in the future, but that simply means that if anyone wants to use your MCP server, is that they're going to register in order to get credentials in order to use it, right? So if you want to enable DCR on the Auth0 platform, you go to Settings, Advanced, and it's here somewhere. Yeah, right? You just flip that, and now it's enabled on your tenants. And the last thing you need to do is, because these applications will get registered as third-party apps, third-party means that you don't control it, versus a first-party app is something you control. You're going to decide that if someone, when they go through that authorization flow, right, when they either create an account or log in, you're going to identify that there's a specific connection or repository that is going to be used that we're going to kind of elevate, right? We're going to say that this is, I can't remember what it's called, a domain-first connection. So that's all you really need to do, right? So go to auth0.com/signup, get a tenant, you can use it for free, go to Settings, Advanced, turn on DCR, and then decide where are these users going to go. And that should give you the building blocks to implement an authorization server, because you're going to have to update your MCP server to actually use OAuth. And it's that simple. So we have an MCP server. We connected it to an authorization server, whichever one you prefer. Now users can use your MCP server. They can create accounts. They can log in. What that login looks like, it's up to you. If you want MFA, if you want to prompt the user, ask them for more information, you can definitely do that. But at the end of all that, the idea, at the end of all that, the idea is that you get tokens. Tokens. And we talked about those ID tokens, access tokens, or refresh tokens. But to go back to that, say we were going to build an app that I, Lewis, can go and say, I want to use your MCP server. So I'm going to use your MCP server. Maybe I'm going to connect to Claude, maybe now ChatGPT, and that's fine. But now maybe I want to do something more with it. I want to create my own agent, right? Because I'm going to start a new company. And within my agent, I want to leverage your MCP protocol. So that's fine. Like, you can continue to do that. And that's kind of what Claude does, is that you have a variety of different connectors you can apply, but you can use it within Claude. But now if you want to use it within your own application, you would build that agent, right? And then you would maybe provide it as a tool within your agent. And then what you then introduce is, we now want the user to essentially authenticate themselves. The reason being is, like, let's imagine that your tool is Gmail, right? You're not going to ask the user for their credentials directly. That's a very bad thing. That's actually something that used to happen maybe more than 10 years ago. So what you do is, essentially, the Gmail MCP server says, I need this user to authenticate. The user gets a browser pop-up, they authenticate, and then what the MCP client is going to get back is going to be tokens, right? So anytime it wants to make a call to, like, the free busy to create events, et cetera, or whatever that tool might be, it's going to present the access token. So the tool, the agent that you're creating has this tool, and now it has the initial tokens for the user. The user logged in to your agent, because we want to know who that user is, so we have tokens for that. And then the user said, I want to connect my Gmail. And so we took them through that process, and now you have tokens for Gmail. Your app has to is going to use in order to get to the Gmail tool. But let's say you now want to introduce teleconferencing. So it could be Zoom, it could be Teams, it could be you name it. So you provide these options to your users because you want to meet them where they are, right? That's going to give them a very good experience. And you're going to use OAuth. So now for this one user, you have all these different tokens that you have to manage. And that's why tokens. So something that we've come up with, and there's a variety of different ways you can do this, is that within the Auth0 product, we have something called a token vault. And I'm hoping to go through a demo to show that to you. But the idea is that you have the user, and this is fun, any kind of image generation LLM, type what it is you want, and then say in the Simpsons style, right? And what you get is a presentation that looks a lot like this. So the user, right, wants to use the agent that you're building. And I'm going to use the example of Slack, but this could be Gmail, Zoom, et cetera. And when you're thinking about this, like times it by 10. Like all the tools you're going to have that you're going to need the user to authenticate against because they have an account there perhaps, because it's very important that you're always making use of the user context. We don't want to use API keys or anything of that sort. So the user makes a request to complete an action to the agent. The agent says, I need you to authenticate, and we want consent. Consent is very important. And we send the user to Auth0, but this could be WorkOS or anyone else. So the user goes to Auth0, and Auth0 shows them a login screen, right? And now from that login screen, after the user successfully authenticates, we're going to redirect the user to that third party, right, where that other account is. So this is going to be your Gmail, your Zoom, et cetera. And the user might have like an SSO experience there. They may not. But they could also go there and have log in with a different set of credentials. So they go there, they log in, and what comes back from that other service, that third-party service, is going to be these tokens, right? So now we have a refresh token and access token from the service that says, here you go. This is all you really need, given what you asked for with the initial request. So with Auth0, we have this cool feature called the token vault. So instead of you needing to juggle the tokens for Gmail, all the different tools, you take the tokens and you give them Auth0, and we'll put them in the token vault for you. What we're also going to do there is we're going to maintain that lifecycle. So that thing that your phone's doing, where it's continuously taking a refresh token and exchanging it for more refresh tokens and access tokens, the token vault will manage that for you. And if the user were to sever consent and say, I don't want this agent to have access to this tool on my behalf anymore, the next time we go to try to do that refresh, we won't, because now the third party will block us. So we also have this concept of account linking, but I'm just going to ignore that for now. And now what our agent gets, the agent we're building, is they get tokens, but they get the tokens that the user, that they would have to manage anyways for the user, right? So these tokens that are for that initial authentication on Auth0 or whatever else they might be using. So these are tokens that you're typically going to manage anyways. And where you store them, there's a variety of different ways to do that. But the idea here is what you have now are Auth0 tokens. And it's an access token, ID token, and refresh token. And you don't need to necessarily worry about the third-party tokens. When you do need a token for Zoom or Gmail, et cetera, you simply take the Auth0 refresh token, send it to Auth0, say, I need a token for Zoom. And based off of that, we will give you the updated access token for that third-party service. So now your agent, if it's doing things autonomously, right, it could now do that by simply going to Auth0, getting the tokens it needs to complete the action. And so we've kind of wrapped this all around the idea of a token vault and SDKs. And let me show you what that looks like. So jump out of this. And I'm just going to log out of anything that I might use. Sign out. Yep. GenAI. OK, so I have an agent I created. And I'll log out of, do I need to log out? I don't think so. OK, so this is like a healthcare app that has an agent within it. And the idea here is, if I go to my dashboard as part of this application, right, I have these different metrics, et cetera, but I have this little thing here called connected apps. So as part of the app I'm building is that I want the user to be able to connect their accounts from these apps to my agent. So we have things like email, calendar, an EHR, an MCP server called Quest Labs. And in this example, I have Zoom. So Zoom is not connected. And the idea here is that the user has already connected all the others here. They've gone through that process for each one. And Auth0 is storing the tokens. So I can do a quick check to say, hey, do we have tokens for calendar? And they'll say, yep, here they are. So I know that's connected. But Zoom isn't connected. So if I now go to my agent and I'll say, I don't know, schedule a Zoom meeting. And I hope this works. Okay, schedule a Zoom meeting for an MCP event. Okay, so it is essentially went to the token vault. It said, here's a user to refresh token. I need an access token for Zoom because I need to go do this thing. And so in the token vault, you saw it was disconnected. There's nothing there for my agent. So now it's going to inline walk the user through that process, right? So I'll go to authorize. I already have a session in Zoom. I do, right? So this is the Zoom consent screen. I'll say that, allow. And I might get another consent because I'm running this locally. Yep. Right, so it's now booked the Zoom meeting. Behind the scenes, what's happening there is I'll use our management API and then I'll get into the code in the SDKs. Where am I? Database connections. So if I get a management API token, I'll try to do this quickly. Copy that, and then go to documentation. Right, for my user, I'm going to kind of just show you what's in the what we call it a token set, but that's in the token vault for the user. Well, set API token, set token. And if I go back to my application, which is here, right, and if I go to settings, right, so that Zoom is now connected, right? It's just doing a quick little check to say, is there anything there that I can use? So there's an SDK that kind of wraps us all around a lot of that logic. But if I use the management API for the users, and I need to get this specific user, so this is, all right, I'm kind of wasting time here. I'm on the wrong tenant. So that wouldn't work.
Tokens, you have the wrong tenant.
Yeah.
It's not an auth night.
It's not. But the idea there is that there's a token set, and what I can do is I can do something where I go in, I delete the Zoom token set, and then everything kind of falls apart. But it just simply asks the user again to like, I need you to authorize. From a code perspective, so here we are. Right, so this is based off a quick start that we have. We have a quick start called Auth0. Sorry. I don't.
Should click as a command plus or control. There you go.
Okay. So we have this quick start called Assistant 0. Assistant 0 kind of has all our SDKs built in and an example. So it has the example of user authentication, it has the example of the token vault. It also has an example of async authorization. And what I mean by async authorization is if I go to my healthcare app, I have this EHR with a bunch of files. We also solve for like fine-grained authorization, so like per file permissions, but we really look at it based off of relations. So actually there's relationships here built in the back end that for every file I upload, it gets attached to the user. Now, when a doctor needs access to that file, I don't give the doctor access. I simply say that this doctor is tied to this user. And then the FGA system figures the rest out. So in this case, if I want to, I don't know if it's my, oh, you know what? Start that. Okay. So if I were a doctor and I want to share patient information with another doctor, or in this case, a specialist, right? I go here, I say share with specialist, pick the specialist. And what's happening now is that it's done in async authorization directly to the patient, to whatever kind of modality they have registered within the system. It could be a push notification, it could be an SMS, it could be an email. So on my phone, right, I have this request to be like, do we want to share this file? I'll say allow. And it's kind of doing it asynchronously here also. But eventually it'll update once we finally update that permission on the back end. And the permission now is like that there's a specialist tied to this user, I believe. That's how I set it up. And that just kind of makes permissions a lot easier to deal with. Let's see if I refresh. No, okay. Believe me, it does the thing. Thank you. So yeah, there's this quick start that makes things really easy. And now quickly, like how this translates to the enterprise world is, from an enterprise perspective, it's a really bad user experience that on the day that I start, I need to connect Workday, Salesforce, you name it, across the organization. Because that's how it would work the way things are right now. So there's something called, it's in draft right now, and it's been written by Aaron Parecki, Brian Campbell, Carl McGinnis. And it's essentially a new RFC that they're trying to put out, or a new standard that takes existing standards, and it's called an Identity Assertion Authorization Grant. And the idea here is that if you're familiar with all these different tokens and what was happening, is that today in a corporate world, the identity provider, it could be Okta, it could be anywhere else, knows that the user can SSO into like Grammarly, Box, Salesforce. But it doesn't know that the user might be necessarily sharing information between the two, right? It just knows that the user can authenticate to the two because they've allowed it. They've created SSO connections. And if you think of that agent perspective, I as a user, if I want to connect my Grammarly or Box account, I have to go through that step for every single tool. So what the cross-app access, which the technical name is Identity Assertion Authorization Grant, does is we know that when the user logs in through their corporate identity provider, they're going to get the ID token, access token. So what we're creating here, or what this is an open standard that's being created by a bunch of people, much smarter than I am. What they're doing is they're taking the ID token that comes from their corporate IDP, and within the corporate IDP, they can set policies. They can say now, they can get extremely granular if they wanted to. They can say that Grammarly and Box can share resources, or Grammarly can request resources from Box if it wanted to. And so what your agent would do is that it would take the ID token, go to Okta, and say, I need an access token for Box as an agent. I need one for Salesforce and CRM, et cetera. And as long as the policy is there and the user and everything checks out, then what will happen is that there's this new kind of token called an ID JAG that the agent, and I know I'm not showing an agent here, but the agent could also be Grammarly, will now go directly to Box, which trusts the same IDP because the user is SSOing through the same IDP, and say, I have this JAG token, I now want to get an access token. And what's really interesting about this is that the IDP, from a workforce perspective, now has observability in terms of what resources are crossing applications. But from that day one perspective, if you think about the agent experience, is that on day one, when I log in and I access that agent, I can have all my apps connected. Because now my agent, based off of the policy set at the corporate level or IDP level, could simply exchange the ID JAG for access tokens for the other applications. Now this all works as long as everyone kind of adheres to the spec. It's not quite a full out, I guess, sorry, there's someone here, what would you call a spec that is fully ratified? A ratified spec? Yeah, yeah, it's not a fully approved spec. But the idea here is that as many different IDPs that we can get that would implement this, the better it will be for everyone, right? From the enterprise perspective, but also the user experience. And that's it.